A Taste for the Seasons, Chapter 2. The Park Closes at Dusk. I'm not a big car nut. I don't go buying car mags or anything. I've always just enjoyed the feeling of being behind the wheel. I always loved driving. I love the feeling I get controlling 2 tons of steel. I remember when I was very young, my father, who had come here from Puerto Rico, would let me sit on his lap and steer his 1946 sedan. I recall it being a big car with a big green steering wheel. It was like one of those L trains pulling into Penn Station. My little hands grabbed the wheel tightly. He would control the pedals as we drove down Main Street, and if I started steering wrong, he would correct the wheel with his knee. Those were such simple days. I miss the simplicity of my childhood. 4 months ago, I buried a close friend and co-worker. Nancy died on a rainy New Year's Eve in an auto accident. The rain had washed her blood from the street before it could stain the blacktop. Only a small cross and a bouquet of flowers marked the spot next to the tree she hit. Nancy was 22. She was a bright girl who was going places. She didn't deserve to have her life taken away so soon. Nancy expired in the back of an ambulance. She never made it to the hospital. The news of her death was a shock to all. Afterwards, I quit my job I was bored of anyway. I just couldn't go in there without seeing her face. Another worker, Sean, also left the cafe. He was Nancy's boyfriend. Sean went back to his home state of Kentucky to tend to the family farm after his father passed away. Sean took the news of Nancy's death harder than anyone. I think he blamed himself. I embraced Nancy's passing as a sign to live and enjoy the experience. There was nothing holding me back from chasing my childhood dream. After burying a good friend, it was time for me to start living again. I wasn't looking to get rich, wasn't looking to rake in the dough. I just wanted to be able to drive and get a check for doing it. Didn't matter where or how. I just really enjoyed being behind the wheel. I had the skills to pay the bills. Carlos was one of my boys from the old school days. He hooked me up with goods, the cab company he was working for. When we were young, Carlos and I used to terrorize the streets of Spanish Harlem. We ran shit. We used to play stickball on the block for hours. Carlos was a subpar player at best. He really didn't have any game, but I always picked him. We'd always be on the same team. He was my boy for life. After all the paperwork and technical bullshit, I got the job. Later, I was asked to join the union, Local 101A, which was fortunate for me. Everyone at the company was mourning the loss of Jose Martinez, one of the more seasoned drivers who had been taken out, murdered in cold blood while on the job. The buzz around the terminal was Jose, who was 48, had picked up a thin man with dark hair and pale skin. Jose took this man as requested to an unknown location downtown. The two then argued over the amount of the fare. The pale man exited the car he wasn't about to pay. He felt the mileage counter was rigged. Traffic was too heavy on city streets. Jose couldn't get out of his cab. He tried to open up the passenger side window, but it was broken. It had fallen off the track earlier in the week. Instead, he swung open the passenger side door and continued the argument. It had been a tedious day, and Jose didn't want to lose the fare. It would have come out of his own pocket if the man didn't pay the meager bullshit amount he owed. The man, looking into the front of the cab, noticed a screwdriver over the passenger floor. It was wedged partially under the mat. Just an orange and black handle was sticking out. He raised the rusty flathead over his head. Jose put his hands up to shield himself from the screwdriver. Jose watched as it punctured through the palm of his hand. He screamed out, but no one stopped to help. The man freed the screwdriver from Jose's hand and stabbed him a second time. This time, the bloody, rusted screwdriver was embedded in Jose's shoulder. It stopped traveling into his flesh when it finally hit bone. Then it was removed once again. Before Jose could react, he was pinned against the driver's door. The man then plunged the screwdriver into the side of his temple. Jose screamed in pain as the metal was twisted, driven clean through his skull. The tip of the screwdriver burst out the other side. It made a sound like a packing air bubble being crushed, spraying blood onto the driver's window. His brown eyes dislodged from their sockets, and Jose died right there on the spot. His hands were clenched so tightly from the anguish, his knuckles were white. The front half of the cab was a bloody mess. When the boys in blue finally arrived at the cab, both the killer and Jose's eyes were gone. They were nowhere to be found. His dark brown peepers had plucked out of their sockets and taken as a trophy. Jose's killer was later captured and identified as Garbanzo Movier, a known serial killer. His only comment when asked about the missing eyes was, "The eyes are the gateway to the soul." Movier wouldn't say what he did with them. I heard 4 different narrations of the story, most of them being too bizarre for me to repeat or try to project any of them actually happening. The car I was assigned to was Carlos's first cab, a 1991 Chevy Caprice. Surprisingly, it was in immaculate shape. I'd expect to see a lot of dents and dings. The yellow paint was faded from being out in the sun, but the body was unmarked. It needed tires, though. The rears were almost bald. The driver's side carpet was almost worn out. The only problem I had with this new occupation was they made me hang this plaque with my picture on it. Under my photo was all my personal shit for the world to see. Name, Joseph John Hernandez. Sex, male. Height, 5'8". Weight, 165 pounds. Race, Hispanic. Date of birth, December 3rd, 1972. No one called me Joseph. I disliked being called Joseph. I was JoJo to my boys and my family and the people I worked with. Now I had to listen to all these jerk-offs who thought they were getting in touch with me by calling me Joseph. I never even bothered to correct the passengers. I think a part of me liked it better that way. More than likely, if I said something, I would just be furthering the conversation, instigating them to go on talking. They didn't need to know me, and I didn't need to know them. All I really wanted to do was drive. It gave me a good feeling. I used to be into all kinds of prescription and non-prescription drugs. I had a passion for finding the next high. I used to get all fucked up as soon as I got off of work. This all stopped after my New Year's Eve party. I just stopped cold. The funny thing is, I'm more likely to get pissed with people than I was before. Could it be I was going through withdrawal? If it was, it didn't matter. I'd get past it. In memory of Nancy and Sean, I'd never light a joint again. It was about 3 p.m. on a bright Saturday in New York City. The scalding sun beat down, causing everyone to be in a rush. Coming off a relatively bland winter, no one expected such a rousing winter. Towering buildings of stone, metal, glass, and so on offer no traces of shade. Instead, eclipsing the sun, they act as reflectors, magnifying the blistering rays. A portly man in a tan suit, with light brown boots and dark glasses and a white cowboy hat, flagged me over. I sat at the red light, listening to Iron Maiden's The Prisoner. Across from where he was standing, pedestrians crowded the crosswalk, attempting to beat the light. I recognized him, the portly man, as a repeat fare from earlier in the week. My man was loaded. His watch alone was worth more than $1,000, and his clothes were at least triple. He was transferred here from Texas by NBC Studios. He was a producer, and left at that. Didn't say any more. I wasn't asking any questions. Didn't care to probe any further. The light finally turned green, and I honked the horn. The next car to me joined in, and people cleared the path. I turned the song off and pulled the cab up to the sidewalk. He opened the door and got in, only this ride, he wasn't alone. The cab tilted towards the roadside where he was sitting. He was with the hottest Asian bitch I'd ever seen. Her hair looked like wet black silk with maroon highlights. She was about my age, which was at least half his age. Her petite frame was stuffed into a low-cut maroon sundress. Her eyes were thin and dark, and her slight lips were highlighted with lipstick matching her dress. "Howdy, son. How the hell are ya? Can't believe I got the same driver twice in 1 week." Tex, as I called him, was very loud, but a real nice guy. "Take us to the Museum of Natural History, and no scenic routes. It's hot, you hear?" He chuckled as he took off his hat to reveal a blue striped dress shirt. His big belly was shaking. He had a beard, but no mustache, and a mole to the right of his nose. "To the museum it is. Yo, I'll take you the shortest way I know." I hit the gas and made a right at the next light. "My little lady friend here has never been there. Isn't that a hoot?" He hugged her with an arm he had over her back seat. She looked so small next to him. He was a mountain. "Never? What a shame. It's good to get a little culture. I've never been there myself, had no desire to go either. I was as cultured as I was gonna get." "We're gonna fix that though, right, sweetie?" His tight-fitting shirt was stained from sweat under his armpits. The girl wasn't wearing a bra, and Tex began playing with her tits, squeezing her nipples. She reached for a zipper and started to undo it. She was about to polish his shit right there, but he waved her off. "You so good to me," she giggled like a teenager. Her English wasn't half bad. Then again, it was only half good. She was like, most likely one of those call girl bitches fresh off the boat, looking to make fast cash, which to send back home. She was the only reason why the Texan chose a cab over a limo. I dropped them off on the side of the park, and Tex gave me $13 for a $3 fare. As he put his jacket back on, he shouted, "Keep the change, Joey. You done good." I think he had a cocktail too many. He slammed the door and was off to entertain his, well, whatever the bitch was. Like I said, he was loud. I unwrapped a stick of winter fresh gum and put it into my mouth. It's amazing how much more enjoyable life is when you enjoy your job. The next fare was a guy in his late 30s. He was dressed in mahogany-colored jeans and an olive t-shirt. "Can you take me to the Upper West Side? I want to go to 1553 West 85th Street, off Miser Ave." He had medium brown hair, cut short, with sideburns and a goatee. "Let's go, man," I remarked. Something about him disturbed me. I reset the mileage counter, then stopped to stare at him in the passenger side mirror. It was the best way to check out someone without them knowing it. I thought I'd recognized him. His voice sounded familiar, but from where? 1553 West 85th was the classy joint my former place of employment was. I was sure of it. "You cabbies don't get many good fares, so I bet I'm going to change that. Everyone else is fiction. I'm fact. I'm the real deal." I didn't recognize him. The guy in the back seat was Mad Dog Kometz, an on-air personality for this classic rock station. From time to time, he'd broadcast his show live from 1553 West 85th. He was also a regular there, but he didn't recognize me, which I found a little insulting. I didn't know what the fuck he was talking about, so I kept my mouth shut and listened. This is a good one. This blonde suspects her boyfriend is cheating on her, so she goes out and buys a handgun off the street. She's never used a handgun before, but there she is, proud owner. Sure enough, when she gets home, she opens the door to find her man humping this redhead, plowing the shit out of her. The guy's really going to town, and obviously she's hurt and angry, so she goes into her purse, pulls the gun, and pops off 3 rounds into the redhead. Then she points it to her own head, and the boyfriend sees this and yells, "No, baby! No, don't do it!" The blonde replies, "Live with it." Then she pulls the trigger and she kills herself. He started laughing. I laughed, but I had to force it. Luckily for me, I was at the drop-off spot by then. "That's $7.50, my man." I pulled up to the curb. He paid me, then he got out. The cheap bastard only tipped me $1. I had to listen to this stupid joke. But that's how he tipped in the cafe, too, always with the jokes and stingy with the bucks. I guess he didn't believe in giving a little extra. I watched as he went inside. The car idled as I looked through the glass door. Inside, my former boss, Bob, was sucking on an unlit cigar. His white shirt was covered with grease and slop from the kitchen as usual. Bob was a great cook. That's one of the reasons the place did so well. I could see a few new faces waiting tables. A middle-aged male and 2 females, one older with scarlet hair, and the other a young brunette. I didn't miss that place at all. People are so picky about their food. Welp, life goes on. Serving food to strangers isn't my forte anymore. I glanced in the back seat. Since it was empty, I guess I was talking to myself. I took the $1 tip, looked at it. The right-hand corner was blacked out in a triangle shape, and the 10-digit serial code read all zeros. No letters, just zeros. I placed the $1 in my shirt pocket. I sat listening to the clicking of the directional for a moment. The sweltering heat was sapping me. After merging into traffic, I soon passed the park where Sean used to go. It was packed with people enjoying the sunshine on this lazy day. It was one of the first really hot days of the year, and seemingly not the last. Some were laying out, others were rollerblading. I noticed the "Park closes at dusk" sign was covered with graffiti. I hated seeing anything being defaced. People always have topics on their minds, and most don't always give 2 shits about how to get across. The orange and black graffiti read on the sign, "Give Mouvier the chair. Give the American people justice for once." Mouvier, now that's one life I'm glad I was never touched by. As I said, he played the taxi game before I came along. I pray for Jose and for those who was taken from. Mouvier deserves to get what's coming to him. Our justice system wouldn't let a motherfucker let him slip through. Hopefully they've learned from their mistakes in the past, because there's still the cutter on the loose. I drove to JFK Airport to pick up a Mrs. Bernice Geibert. Her husband phoned the ride in. I circled the Delta terminal looking for her ass, but she wasn't to be found. Finally, I parked and went inside. Didn't have a name card to hold up, so I hoped she'd be in plain sight. The baggage area was empty of people, except for a black woman, sitting on a bench, plugging away at a laptop. "Mrs. Geibert?" I asked. "I'm from Goods Cab Company. I'm your ride." She shook her head. "What kept you? I've been sitting here almost an hour, waiting. I'm getting cramps." "I was told to pick you up outside. That's the instructions your husband left, so that's where I was." "Well then, that's your first mistake, was listening to him. Second, was not having the smarts to come sooner." I helped carry her bags to the car, and she didn't utter another word. In fact, she didn't talk the entire ride home, just stared out the window. When I dropped her off, she paid the fare to the dime and stiffed me any tip. They name streets after people like her one-ways. Throwing the off-duty sign on, I navigated my tired cab through the traffic and back to the garage. I parked the car, got out and stretched. My back cracked. I'd been sitting for so long my legs were cramped too. Tossing the now not-so-wintry fresh gum into the garbage can, I overheard two drivers talking in the back office. I walked in and snatched my time card from its pouch on the wall. The guy standing closest to the time clock was stammering, babbling about a possible strike if the union didn't get improved medical coverage and dental insurance. I punched out, not wanting to get involved in office politics. My workday is over, and I wanted no part of any kind of logistic nonsense. Time to go home and chill till tomorrow. I left the garage on foot and headed for the bus stop. I waited on the corner for the number 5, which drops me off a block from my apartment. Some car nut, huh? I don't even have a ride of my own. If I did, I'd be driving a Vet or a Camaro, something quick, with rims and a system. The plus side is not owning a car is I don't have to pay insurance or for a parking garage every month. The bus pulled up on time, which was cool. I broke out my pass and flashed it to the old white driver, who hardly gave it a glance. He looked to be about 100. I didn't feel very safe with him behind the wheel. The fucker was struggling, looking out the driver's mirror. I don't want this cataract-ass driving. I worked my way towards the rear of the bus. Man, it was crowded. Every seat was taken, but I didn't mind standing, not at all. Just wanted to get home. One guy in Farmer Jones suspenders was eating pork rinds from a glass jar. He took up almost 2 seats with his big fat ass. He caught me looking and motioned to the half seat next to him. I chose to stand. Like I said, I don't mind. In the aisle seat a couple rows back was this well-built blonde. Her legs were crossed, and she was bouncing the top one. Suddenly I wanted to laugh at the joke I'd heard earlier in the cab. I got closer so I could see what the article was she was reading. The enchantress noticed me standing there to her and smiled. I smiled back while thinking of an appropriate pickup line. "Yo," I said, to buy another moment. She glanced up and abruptly voiced, "Yo to you." I continued, "I'm Jojo. Didn't mean any disrespect." A man, I wrote back, had a fountain pen poking out of his red pocket protector. He'd been listening to the exchange. I remembered the dollar in my shirt pocket and took it out. I gestured to the pen. "I need to write something down. Do you mind?" He looked slightly surprised. "Sure." He handed over the pen. I scribbled, "Goods Cab Company," their phone number, and asked for Jojo in black ink to the right of George on the crispy bill. I would have given my home number, but I liked this approach. I handed the woman the dollar. "I'm a cabbie. If you ever need a ride, give Goods Cab Company a call and ask for cab number 350. I'll be glad to drive over and pick you up in my big yellow taxi. If you've got the money, even if you don't, I'll take you where you need to go. So life doesn't pass you by. You know, you might be at a crossroads right now." "I'm Julie," she responded, putting the dollar in her purse, folding the newspaper as she did, so I could see the front page. "If I find myself in need of a ride down your path, I might just call." She smiled. The headline of the paper read, "Ninth body found in tri-state area."